This is the Career Clinic podcast, and I'm your host, Ronnie Dickerson Stewart. I am super thrilled about this episode because we have the pleasure of an amazing guest, one that has been with us for two episodes. Episode 10, Listen to Your Inner Voice, and episode 16, The Keys to Honoring Your Values. Back again with us. Now, one of my favorite and most frequent guests is Lindsay Yellin, Coach Lindsay Yellin. Hey, Lindsay, how are you doing?
Hey, Ronnie, what a pleasure to be back here. I am so honored to be sharing this space with you again. So thanks for inviting me back. I am just on top of the world here with you. Feel great.
Aw. Today, we have a very provocative topic and one that I would say is going to get a little bit personal. And personal in that both Lindsay and I, we are going to share a little bit more about our connection, how we have worked together, how we've grown together, as well as something really cool that we're working on that perhaps is a way that we can work with you. Today, we're talking about navigating the sticky, tricky middle part of your career. And Lindsay, we have some stories, don't we?
Oh,
We
yeah.
have some things. Before we get into that, so much has changed and so many dynamic things have happened for you personally and professionally and just in life since the last time you were with us on the show. And that was 40 episodes ago. Can you even believe it?
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and so tell us about how you've been and what you've been up to since we last had a chance to be in community with you.
Yeah. My gosh. It feels a lifetime ago. And so much incredible stuff has happened that I'm excited to share. So thank you for asking. Personally, not only did I get married in the last year, actually almost exactly a year ago, but also moved out with my now husband from Chicago to California. So that was a pretty huge transition from being in the Midwest now to the West Coast, but a fun transition to say the least. But professionally, there's been a ton that has happened. When we last spoke, I was working full time in advertising still, but had coaching in my business was my side gig, what I did in addition on the outside of advertising. Since then, I made a few transitions. I went first to part time advertising, part time building my business. And then last year, at the start of the year in 2022, I went full time, made the leap full time into my business, not quite sure where things were going to take me. And I was certainly surprised by what came. So I've continue and do continue to support mid level to senior executive clients who are feeling stuck and unfulfilled in their careers to help them find clarity through deep self awareness and connection while also building tangible tools to take very self driven career action. So I'm still doing that one to one, but also my business has grown into the corporate space by facilitating leadership workshops and connection workshops. And that is a space that I didn't expect to step into so quickly, but I love so wholeheartedly. And I can also thank you for all of your mentorship and support as I navigated this new space for the first time. You've been an invaluable resource.
Well, and I have loved watching all the things that you've been doing across your client ecosphere, across the industries that you support and serve. It's been just extremely inspiring for me, also as a peer coach and business owner who has stepped out of the same kind of spaces and is just doing the work to support the folks still inside of those rooms and those spaces. And I just love what you're doing with Yellin Coaching. And we're going to get into some of that as we chat today, but I want to take us like back a little bit, right? So life and business, as we've said, has evolved for you. But one of the reasons beyond that, that we are so closely connected, which ties directly back to the topic of today's episode, is the fact that we were arm in arm and literally face to face, like navigating some of the most significant parts of the middle of our careers. And can you share some of your most profound memories from that time, from that era?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Being brought back to that time, I just remember us literally sitting next to each other or just stealing moments of walks outside and talking through some of the grittiest stuff at the time that felt so monumental. And what a treat and pleasure and gift it is to reflect back on them now with you from where we are today. So I love that you're creating this space for us and for your community. And because it's a time that's worth reflecting on. It's a really prominent time in our careers. And when I think back to it to myself, There's a specific point in time in my career that I really think about, and that is when I'd had the opportunity to go work in London for the agency I was working for, and that was a whole growth experience in itself, but then I was coming back to Chicago after about a year and a half, 2 years, into a promoted role, into a brand new established team, and that was especially sticky for quite a few reasons. One, I'll just talk about first is just coming into that promoted position. It wasn't any promotion, which any promotion comes with new responsibilities and whatever, but it was a really prominent one. It was that promotion to VP or the first kind of layer of senior leadership, I would say.
Vice president.
Vice
President's the first
president,
layer.
baby.
And
And
we were so excited too. I just remember that time in your career just being so thrilled for you and just, yes, she absolutely will kill it in this work, deserves this role. Not that that would ever be a question. We work hard, but to see you go to London and then come back and just to be killing it just made me feel proud as a friend and as a colleague. And it was so inspiring. So sorry, I won't stop the flow, but I just have to acknowledge I remember it vividly.
I'm so glad you bring that up because your championship and support during that transition time was something I'll never forget. I'm sure you remember the moments and why this was so sticky for me of coming to you and saying, am I doing this right? Because when you step into, or when I was stepped into a position, it was like a rite of passage into now this leadership group. You're invited to meetings that you weren't invited to before. And there was a level of responsibilities and expectations of a leader at this level now that weren't there before. But there's no manual that comes with how to do it. So you're just now have this title, have these responsibilities, and feels like everyone's looking at you in a new way, but you haven't only really changed much. So it was a really difficult transition and which triggered a lot of imposter syndrome or just insecurity of, am I doing this right? Am I doing enough? And looking around a lot. But I had you to look up to, someone who had been there already and navigated it so incredibly. Stealing those moments with you to say, this is intimidating, help me, were what allowed me to navigate that powerfully, despite the fact that I felt very insecure.
Yeah, I just think about that because you were in it, but I wasn't. I was a VP at a different point and I'd been promoted and on to other levels of that from entry level leadership to the next levels and so forth. But I also experienced the same thing that you experienced because it is a line of demarcation between the understanding of who you are and then others' understanding of who you are and what you do. And also to some degree wanting to prove yourself and wanting to do well and then to your point, being invited into all these new spaces where the rules of navigating those spaces look a lot different than they might have leading up to those spaces where perhaps your technical abilities were more lauded. And now it's about relationships and navigation and diplomacy and this full spectrum of leadership skills, which of course you've been doing because you're in the role, but there's another layer of doing that consistently that takes on an entire different level of energy and requirements. And a lot of those requirements are being able to look around to the people around you to know where to tap in and how and who you want to learn from.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think so much of that is powerful. Being able to look around and say, who can help me here? Who do I want to learn to? Who is leading in the way that inspires me, that aligns to my values and my leadership approach? But it's also is a tricky, slippery slope because I was also in a position where my leader and the account I was in wasn't very present for lots of reasons unsolved of their own, lots of stuff going on. So I was navigating this new team, all this very much alone. And I didn't know, it was very uncharted territory for the team and for me. So as much as I had resources like you and other strong leaders to look to and to ask, it felt like it still wasn't enough for me. And I found myself looking around so much and looking for a lot of validation. And I think there was a lot of energy that was spent there instead of that was spent questioning myself and worrying about my perception so much that I didn't use the energy I could have to look forward, to stay focused on people who could have helped me move forward. So that is something that I think is the so what of this is when in that sticky middle, it's so easy to get lost in the expectations and so lost in looking around and questioning yourself that we often forget to look into ourselves and to look to the ones who will continue to keep us focused and moving forward.
Absolutely. And that I so often talk about the reality and of the bumps and the bruises and the lessons and the lesions received and learned during the course of my career. And then I know the course of our careers, but some of the most profound ones, those lessons came right when we were going through that middle. And you learn more about yourself. You learn more about how you want to lead and how you really need to grow in order to be the leader and human that you want to be, or I knew that I wanted to be. And so, what you just said is a perfect lead into my next thought or question because it's easy to look back from right now and to have a retrospective point of view with a lot of clarity. But now that you're beyond some of those things, can you tell us a little bit or a couple of your most profound lessons from that era where you were learning so much?
Yeah, great question. And I think it begins the first is you don't have to be the lead to be the leader that your team needs. And I started to observe this quite early in my career, especially by watching you grow and navigate your career, Ronnie, and seeing you command spaces and command places, even when you were not maybe the quote unquote leader of the room or of the team. And by being able to use your magic to shift cultures, to shift energy, to shift and create connections that people craved but weren't creating on their own. Because I think we so often fall victim in thinking that there's a leader of this team or a leadership team. They are the ones responsible creating the culture and creating the connections and driving what we need, making sure our needs are met, which partly, yes, is true. It is their responsibility, but it is not only their responsibility. So
Right.
I have seen cultures of whole teams change because of a junior person or a new person to the team stepping in and bringing the energy that they want there reflected back on them.
Yep.
I do caveat this though, and I'm sure you would agree that you have to feel safe to be able to do this. If you're in an environment where you don't feel safe, then that might be a really intimidating, vulnerable thing to do that might not be right for you. But
Mm.
I share this because you don't need to wait for that white knight leader to come in and create the team that you want to be a part of. You can do little and big things every day to create the culture that you want to be a part of.
Oh, I love that. And I know you have some examples, but you're making me think about times in our workspace. Yes, there are things that I got to do and saw, okay, this is an unmet need. And no one's telling me no, but I know I want it to feel a certain way when I walk into this team and into this space because I'm not doing it to be selfish, but I am a part of this team too. And you can craft and create the realities that you want to experience, regardless of your title. And a lot of times, that's how you grow in followership. That's how you gain new opportunities because people are seeing that, yeah, that person is entrepreneurial in terms of their approach to leadership. And you're supporting leaders that sometimes are tapped for capacity. I love that. So, like, tell us how that's shown up for you in terms of really being that lead, regardless of title.
Yeah. First off, just to build what you said, like stepping into the room and like asking what you need is because like energy is so contagious. So you can show up the energy that you want to see from others. People will pick up on that. And I had a leader, one of my favorite leaders once share that they like leaders bring the weather is what they said.
Mhm.
That is so true. And that stuck with me. And so thinking about that, when I was actually not the lead of a team, but I was a lead in a team, one of the biggest things I did or took control of, and I didn't ask for permission, I went for it, was just creating a space for the team to be a team together. And it sounds really simple. It sounds, oh, another meeting, whatever, the resistance that could get in the way. But I have to say, it was the most culture shifting, profound thing that created really deep connections with the team because it was a time that I took the responsibility of it. I drove all the content and everything. I took responsibility, but it was a time for the team not to talk status, not to talk how the numbers or the projects. It was a team to talk about each other and to talk about the experiences that the team is having together. But most importantly, had dedicated time in that space to acknowledge one another, to celebrate wins, to celebrate qualities in one another that we respected, that were helping drive success with our relationships and with the work. And that made sure that we always had time for people to feel seen and for people to feel valued on the team. And that created a really rich environment of mutual respect and admiration for one another.
I love that. That's an intentional example, but it's very simple. And what that ends up doing for others, it pays dividends in terms of how they feel connected, how they feel inspired, and how they go about their work. I love that.
Yeah. I think what's key in there too is consistency. So it's, oh, I really maybe showing up, taking a gesture or a step or showing up in a certain type of energy or making a certain type of connection or effort. One time is great, but multiple times consistently doing it is how change happens, right? It's like building
Yeah.
habits. It's where magic, that's when it can start to take off.
Oh,
So
mm,
even if it doesn't get rewarded the first time you do it, stick with it. Stick to what makes you feel good. It makes you feel proud. And that will change things.
there's one like before I know you have another thought and another lesson, but before you share that, I remember, and you may remember this too. There was a person named Peter that worked in our space, and he used to do fruit snack Fridays. And you're for this,
Yes.
so Peter used to go floor to floor in our workspace, go through 3 or so floors, and literally have a box of fruit snacks, and he would throw them out on Fridays. And it was just so much joy. And it was a way to get to know people, connect with people, bring some surprise and delight. I think that was like after an era where maybe another cohort of people at work were doing like speakerphone Fridays where someone plays music on a
Yeah.
speakerphone and everyone dials in to a line and you just have music. Okay, we were very low tech with the culture and leadership, but I remember that to this day. And when I talk to leaders about finding their leadership secret sauce and their little things that people will always remember, I talk about Fruit Snack Friday and I talk about Peter. So, Peter, if you're listening to this, I'm still talking about you and your Fruit Snack Fridays and how delightful those experiences were. And that's all it takes is moments like that.
And it's been nearly a decade and we still remember and talk about it. And I can
Yeah.
visualize it so strongly. And
Yeah.
it touched everyone. I brought it, it shifted the energy in a whole floor of people.
Yeah.
So
Always. And smiles on all the faces and just so much energy. I
yeah,
love Fruit Snack Fridays.
you don't have to be the one throwing the fruit snacks to be
No.
the one that can make a difference or that can allow yourself and your authentic energy to radiate off and impact others. So just
Yeah.
take this as permission, permission to do it.
What else?
Okay, so I would say beyond, so first, of course, you don't have to be a lead to be a leader, but also is going back to the topic of values. And I know you might be like, oh gosh, Lindsay going on values again. I bring it up again because it is only useful and is by far the most powerful tool that I create and build with my clients that has some of the greatest impacts in their fulfillment and having their needs met at work. Because when you know your values, it provides freedom and understanding of what your needs are and how situations or people, relationships, may be helping meet them or in falling short. And it helps you diagnose and understand why situations or relationships leave you feeling great or not. And the power of then not only naming them, when you name something, you tame it, but not just naming and understanding it, but the power of sharing it. And as a leader, that is so powerful because you're giving a gift to those around you of a deeper understanding of you, how you lead, what you need to be successful, why you might be responding the way that you are, reacting or acting in situations. So it gives a lot of insight and a lot of freedom too to be able to
Yes.
say, this is who I am. And so just to give a quick example, transparency is a value. And I was on a team where a lot of transparency wasn't there. And it left
Yeah.
me feeling very frustrated frequently. But
Been
I
there.
knew, been there, right? I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are feeling that a lot right now with so much going on. But anyhow, so transparency is key. And I wasn't getting the level of transparency I felt I needed to be successful in my role on certain topics. But I was able to name that it was transparency that was being dishonored for me. So I was able to go to my manager and use that as like my talking point. I feel like transparency is key for my success. I'm not feeling transparency in these things. What can we do? And to try to hold them accountable, but also give insight into why this was really hard for me and why this was a need of mine. And that helped us have a good conversation, move things forward. But what was profound about it was I continued back to that consistency, continued to reinforce that. I'd live transparency, I'd be transparent with my team, I'd request transparency, yada, yada, yada. In time, my manager ended up saying to me, wow, I've rarely been with a leader who is so consistent with how they show up and what they need. And that was because of I would use the language, I would name it, I would show up with it, I would refer to it. And it became a part of me as a leader and my brand as a leader. So then my brand was reflecting what I needed most, which was transparency.
Ooh. So I love that because even I love the example, but even in what you modeled, which is a lot of times when we're right there in the middle, we are also encountering individuals, people, or circumstances who are on their own journey of evolution and leadership too. And so when two, let's call it individuals or entities with lack of awareness or ability to stop, pause, and consider like how they want to move forward or go about things, act where they collide, sometimes that can be incredibly toxic in terms of a situation. Those are the kind of situations we opt out of, but when you can name something, claim something, and have transparency, a lot more is put on the table, and a greater scope of possibilities can emerge for you in terms of how your needs are met. I love that example. Oh, Lindsay, all the things. All right, so with that, it is incredibly easy to reflect back on those times now, right? All those things, and then diagnose, right? Or clearly articulate what was going on or even what we could have done better, especially since we are far removed and have the experience plus our professional coaching lens to add to it when we think about our time then. But that said, if you could speak to yourself in that 7 to 10 year career mark, maybe a little bit beyond, in the middle, what wisdom would you impart? What tools would you bring into your toolkit? What skills would you advise mid career you to start refining?
Oh, little Lindsay, what would I tell you? Okay, so I think a big piece is just that you're not going to be perfect because we are human. So stop trying to be. And that is a really hard thing to reconcile with. But I recently heard something that clicked for me. And it was that we are, and this is very me, was very me, that we are always in this place of striving, of achieving, wanting greater growth, and we want greater success. We're craving it. We work so hard for it. Yet we're also so worried about failing and messing up, receiving tough feedback, being told you fell short on something. However, this is funny because we also know that our greatest growth comes from those mess ups and those quote unquote failures, right? So it's funny. We think, oh, I want to grow. I want to succeed. I want to leap ahead. How do we leap ahead? Probably to have some really tough learned lessons along the way, but we hold ourselves so safe because we're so afraid of falling and getting those lessons. So it's this really often tough loop that we are in that's really difficult. So we are and like I understand why we do this. I understand when I did this. I was so worried about failing all the time and not being good enough or being perfect. And I was just trying to keep myself safe. We're always trying to keep ourselves safe from suffering, from those tough moments of those hard learned lessons. But we end up either just keeping ourselves too safe and not reaching our potential, or we end up hurting ourselves even more with that harsh narrative of that inner critic, beating everybody
Ooh,
else to the punch, right? And
yes. I
telling
mean,
us.
lived experience, you're speaking to it, Lindsay. Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely.
And I gotta give credit. I heard that from Chris Germer, who is an incredible clinical psychologist, and he leads in the space of mindful self-compassion in partnership with Kristen Neff, who is a PhD researcher in the self-compassion space. And I have to say that is probably what do we do about this voice? What do we do about this fear? And my advice is self-compassion. And this is very much a new practice of mine, something that I have been working through myself and learning more and more from bringing to my clients. But it is so critical in building that confidence and building resilience and combating burnout and navigating really difficult situations is through cultivating a practice of self-compassion because we spend so much time beating ourselves up and ruminating to no end, right? What would happen if just 10% of that time was moved from beating ourselves up to supporting ourselves? We are constantly looking for others to give us validation and tell us we're doing well and to build up our self esteem. But that is not guaranteed. And often many are in positions like I was many times where we weren't getting that. That need wasn't met. But we
Yeah.
can meet that need ourselves and we can create our own soft landing in difficult moments and really these sticky situations by reminding ourselves that we are safe, reminding ourselves that we are capable, remind ourselves that we are smart and resilient. And it might not feel like it's doing much, but the science proves otherwise that it does. So that I'm talking, Ronnie, the hand on the heart, closing your eyes, taking a deep breath, and just telling yourself, I am safe, I am capable, may I be at ease. Whatever it sounds like for you of the need that you need to be met, and you are building up a muscle in yourself that is incredibly profoundly useful when going through some really hard times.
I feel like I'm going to take and listen to you saying that over and over again because that reminder and what you're saying is critical. Then that practice, understanding and developing that practice of how you've just described it and the level of intention around self-compassion that is really necessary that we don't hear about enough, like that continues to pervade and be a necessary thing regardless of where you are in your career. But when you have landed into these amazing roles, these exceptional opportunities, when you're in these spaces where really your future, your air quote success, because we know that is a very subjective word,
Mm.
is possible and you can define it. We hear way more about imposter syndrome and the other side of the things that feel like they're not in our scope of control. And we don't hear enough around tactically how to be more self-compassionate. And what you just shared is literally something that anyone can take with them and just even listen to this or just take with them that practice and that provocative question like the 10%. What would it look
Mm,
like to be 10% more compassionate to yourself? For
yeah.
me, I know for a fact that yields a great dividend. The payoff of that has been tremendous for me as I've matured beyond some of those difficult moments, although the difficult moments are always they come up. But understanding the self-compassion piece always brings me back to a center that has way more possibility than the opposite of that, which is self-berating or not loving on myself enough and not caring for myself enough to know that I am resilient. I can navigate anything. And I have a community of people around me who are cheering me on and there to support. That is what self compassionate, like things and this have done for me. And I love that you shared that with our folks listening.
Yeah. And I just think the reality, Ronnie, especially all that you're saying, like the reality is like everyone is always doing their best that they can with what they have.
Yeah.
And sometimes that comes to life in ways that are really hard for us to witness and even reflect on ourselves and how we're acting, but we are always doing the best we can with what we have. As well as the motivation for everyone doing anything is we all just want to feel loved. That could be like feeling seen, feeling heard, feeling valued, feeling connected. So building up a practice and cultivating self compassion in yourself enables you to show up more fully as a compassionate self for others, but for yourself and reminding yourself of that, that you are just doing the best you can with what you have and that you are also just a human being that wants to be loved. Right. So it just helps
Mm,
make those really difficult moments, especially in business when things can really lose the humanity sometimes, to remember that we are actually all humans.
I love that. You've left us with a lot to ponder, but I have a final question because I want to know a little bit more about what you're observing and then what you are doing. In light of all the things you've just shared, when you think about the clients that you support and the folks who are navigating the sticky, tricky middle, who you and I both get to experience every day. So fast forward to today, especially given the shifts in how and even where people work, right? What are you observing and how are you supporting your clients who are now in the shoes that you once were?
Yeah. We're all Everyone is taking in so much right now. And there's a lot to hold right now coming off of the pandemic with a lot that's going on in the corporate space that I know you've spoken about to your community. There's just a lot that can be very overwhelming. And what I'm noticing the most is that we are so in our heads and we're thinking all with our heads. So I spend a lot of time trying to bring my clients to pause, create space, and drop into their bodies. Kristen Neff, I mentioned before, she shared something that I thought was really profound, and that is the idea that our wants are all in our head, but our needs are in our body. So when working, I'm going to say that again, let that land. Our wants are in our head, our needs are in our body. So when I'm working with professionals who are trying to find clarity in their leadership or their professional journeys, we need to get in touch, not with just what they want, but what they need. And so our wants can also be so often focused on what others expect of us, can be influenced by what we think we should be doing, can be reactionary, and not really driven by what is actually right for us.
Mm.
So by naming, dropping into our bodies and actually giving ourselves a chance to hear what we need from ourselves, we're able to acknowledge and to name what is behind those wants and recognize and maybe say something, name something that we are unable or afraid to admit or ask for, but that we know is actually very important to us. And that is what is truly important and what truly matters when trying to make lasting change and move towards greater fulfillment in our careers.
Ooh, that is a drop the mic revelation, right? Our heads versus our bodies. And when we approach this conversation about navigation a lot from our headspace and not the whole of ourselves, which I'm like, oh, I cannot wait to just sit with this for a bit because you're so on point as always. And you're so right. And so, Lindsay, I have to, one, acknowledge you and thank you for the wisdom that you always bring into this space and the considerations you always bring to me as a peer, as a friend, but also a listener. I get to sit back and listen because you do so much deep work in this space with folks in their professional sphere, but thinking about the whole of them. And I so appreciate the work that you're doing. At the beginning of this episode, I teased something and I teased a little bit about something that Lindsay, you and I have been working on and working towards, but we've been collaborating. Can I share with Lindsay with the people, with the listeners? Right?
Absolutely. Yes, please.
We've been collaborating on something that has given us so much joy, and it's taken us back to those days where we've been arm in arm and face to face, but in a good way, not trauma, lumps, lesions. It's been coming from a place of absolute joy, and it's something that what we've been working on is something that we actually only wish that we had available to us when we were partners in the trenches and in those sticky, tricky situations. So Lindsay and I have collaborated to and co-designed a group coaching experience for women who are in the shoes that we were once in, and it's called The Bridge. And The Bridge is a multi-week coaching experience intended to help ease and empower women as they enter the middle of their careers and assume those next level leadership roles. So director, VP, and beyond, where we've been and have definitely have all the stories and experiences to share from that. This is a collaboration between Yellin Coaching, Lindsay's amazing organization, and OhHeyCoach. And it really pulls together the best of our respective coaching practice, our best tools, our best frameworks, and all of our best approaches from the clients that we support and serve who are also in those shoes and beyond. We wanted to share this with you because we've been so excited bringing it to the marketplace and really identifying the types of spaces and organizations specifically to partner with who are right for this experience and really want to champion the folks who were just like us in those shoes within their organization. And we want to give you an opportunity. It's very simple. If you have any of these experiences personally or navigating the middle, or you're in an organization or you're representing an organization and you're supporting people who are navigating the middle and you're interested in learning more about the bridge, again, the collaboration between Lindsay and I and our coaching companies and practices. And if you're interested in bringing this offering to your space, it's very simple. You can just email me info at ohheycoach, oheycoach.com to learn more, and the link and the email will be in the show notes. But I'll be remiss because I know every time Lindsay's on the episode, it never fails to be like, this Lindsay Yellin, amazing coach. I'm like, absolutely. If you want to connect with Lindsay, it is very simple. And she's a phenomenal leader, coach, speaker, teacher, really. If you want to connect with Lindsay, you want to go to Yellin Coaching, YELLINCOACHING.com. The links to connect with Lindsay, of course, will be in the show notes or in the description if you're watching this on YouTube. But we want to be in community with you and we want to support you through the phases that you encounter that can be sticky or tricky or even delightful. And that's what we're here for. That's what we get to do for work. And it's exciting. Lindsay, want you to leave our listeners with a final note or some final thoughts.
I just want to wrap up with a little bit of gratitude. And I know we often in this conversation share gratitude back and forth to each other, but I want everyone to hear that I am where I am in terms of the type of coach that I am, the business I'm building, the courage I have to build the business I'm building, the experiences I've navigated and learned from because I've had a friend, a mentor, a partner, a wise woman in my life like you, Ronnie. So I just want everyone to know that they know how incredibly lucky they are to get your gems and time all the time through this space and others, but that you cannot underappreciate that those resources in your life. And as you navigate, and you touched on this, cultivating these relationships is the most important thing that you can do, earning and building that relationship currency and treating and investing the time into those relationships. Because if we didn't see that ourselves and invest in each other over the years, I would have been so lost and I wouldn't be where I am today. So thank you for all of your continued support and championing. I value it.
This is now an audio and video podcast. So I'm not going to cry for the people because I'm going to turn off this recording and I'll shed my tears. But people know I do not play about Lindsay Yellin. When you find valuable people who add value to your life holistically and that you get to learn from, it's a beautiful thing. And Lindsay, I fully accept that gratitude and it's directed right back at you as well.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. And thank you to your community for allowing me this space and time. It's such an honor to be with you all.
Yes. So thank you all for listening to this episode of the Career Clinic podcast. All the things and the ways to connect are in our notes and description. And we can't wait to be with you for our next episode. Until then, talk soon.